I'm excited because today I'm speaking with my mentor, guide, teacher, coach, and friend, Garth Sam. I think Garth has one of the most interesting biographies on the planet. He's been at one point or another an author, a teacher, an actor, rapper, DJ, law student, entrepreneur, global humanitarian, black belt martial artist, and former Buddhist monk, as well as an international traveler who's been to over 40 countries. I'm talking to him. He's in Thailand right now. And I discovered Garth entirely through serendipity because I found a flyer left in a co-working space in Toronto for his evolutionary men's group that he founded and that's still thriving today, which I'm a member. I'm wearing my Tub T-shirt today, Garth.
Two thumbs up.
And I think without a doubt he's the most interesting human I know, and I'm very lucky to consider him a mentor and a friend. Welcome, Garth.
Wow, with such high praise, I don't even know how I'm going to live up to it, but I'll do my very best, Michael. It's a pleasure indeed to be here with you, of course.
I really worked hard to be effusive on that intro.
Effusive. We like words like effusive, don't we? Yeah, so we wordsmith types, we like to throw things like that. But, thank you very much. It's very complimentary. And, it's been a real pleasure getting to know you over the years and to share time and quality space and mind with a man who I respect tremendously as well.
Well, thanks, Garth. It's really good to connect again after so many months and moons. So,
Yeah.
As I said, I find your background just fascinating, Garth. The actor, the author, life coach, martial artist, entrepreneur. But I think I'm enthused most of all because you were a Buddhist monk, and it's something I've been trying to get around to doing since I started meditation at age 19, and haven't got around to. How the heck did you end up in a monastery in Thailand, and how old were you?
Okay. Yeah. I can tell you the year. I am paying better attention to the year itself than actually how old I was at the time. It's funny about that. But, it's a bit of well, I'll try and make a longer story shorter just for the sake of your audience and anybody who's paying attention. But once upon a time, many years ago, approximately 2001, 2002, I arrived in Thailand, and through a set of, as you call it, serendipitous events, I wound up studying Thai mysticism with a top Thai mystic master in Thailand for some time. During the course of that, I discovered, of course, that paranormal powers and the exploration of the arcane is not really part of conventional Theravada Buddhism, and I'd always felt a calling to explore deeper what traditional Buddhism looks like. So fast forward some years, and we are now, when I'm at the end of a relationship, I disengage, as I call it, which is to mean I ended an engagement with somebody I'd been together with for some years. I had always been interested in coming and having a monastic experience. I had the connections in Thailand to help make that happen, which is very critical as part of the equation to do it properly. You don't just jump off the plane and say, "Hey, I want to be a monk."
Right.
It doesn't quite work that simply. And I decided that part and parcel of what would be effective in helping to heal the relationship wound that I inadvertently created, or I guess advertently created, since I was one who pulled the plug on the relationship, leaving the country and becoming a monk might actually be a really good time to do to have that experience. You're always waiting for the perfect time. Michael, you're saying yourself, you thought about this experience and you wait for all the ducks to align and the money to be there and the time for you to extricate yourself and to become a renunciate and to step back away from the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, if you're fortunate, you can align all those things to make it happen. But it kind of happened that for me, I just jumped and took that opportunity. And so that was back in 2008. But preceding that in 2006 is a little interesting tidbit that goes along with the story, which is that I was involved in a documentary reality show that was about spiritual seeking. And during the course of that, one of the experiences that we did was regressive hypnotherapy. And in the course of my regressive hypnotherapy session, which the idea being that through a hypnotic state, you go back and experience some aspect of your past, whether you can verify that this is a bona fide experience or whether it's something that you're projecting is neither here nor there. But
about childhood experiences, or are we going way back?
Further back, as far back as you go, which is the interesting part. I mean, there was a great movie some years ago by Kenneth Branagh called Dead Again, which sort of explored this idea and the concept of past lives and whatnot. And
yes.
Anyway, in the course of my regression hypnotherapy session, I found myself back as a Buddhist monk, sort of 18th century Buddhist monk. And it felt very, very comfortable, and I felt very, very connected to life as a renunciate monk in a Buddhist country and whatnot. So then 2 years later, I actually become one. that's, the progression of the story lends itself to that sort of outcome.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's I mean, there's so many different directions to take this.
Yeah, I know.
So there, there's that relationship that ended. I'd love to explore, the just relationships in general. But I want to mention that, my wife found this book called Many Lives, Many Masters.
Yes, very famous.
Back and we read it together. Actually, she would read it out loud while I was driving, and we just both found it completely fascinating. That
Yeah.
And I, of course, I'm a skeptic. I wonder, is there any truth to this, or was it simply, an invention? But I really like the idea that we're not just this this flesh and blood. We're something that's more eternal. We're something that persists over time, and perhaps part of a larger, spiritual body of some kind. And I don't have any sort of hard evidence, but I think that's maybe in part what spirituality calls you to do, is sort of use your feeling and your intuition rather than your senses. But
Well, I'd be happy to throw some comments about that in terms of my own perspective around it.
Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I generally like to let the world know that I don't consider myself a religious person. I appreciate and understand the nuances and the social dynamic and the benefits of being connected to an organized, structured religion, but they're not things that have called me deeply. Although, as I say that, you're talking to the person who was a monk, so it kind of seems a bit paradoxical, or maybe a bit of a conflict. But I'm very interested in spirituality in terms of what that means to me, and in terms of what it means to each individual, and discovering that path for themselves. And in the course of that journeying, I've thought a lot about, and in the course of my life in general, I mean, I think a lot about the idea of past lives and the idea of a reincarnation of some sort, whether you have a clear remembrance of that, or whether it's very hazy, or whether, there are little bits and pieces that pop up from time to time. Again, who's to say whether that's accurate? We don't have any objective empirical means of determining that at this point in time. But for me, it's always resonated at feeling very solid. And part of that for me has been around feeling that I am the beneficiary, I am the heir of my previous selves, and that I am enjoying the largesse and the positive things that are unfolding in my life, not simply because I'm mindfully interested in being a positive human on the planet, but because I've done work previously. There are a few archetypes that I feel really connected to in this lifetime that I feel I had even a deeper connection to in past lifetimes. And they tend to be, curiously enough, sort of these two polarities, the warrior and, the sage spiritualist, right? These two are very powerful archetypical forces and energies that I tend to feel strongly connected to. So
that much is clear. I mean, I know you have an affinity for swords and things of that nature.
Yes, I do. I don't know where that comes from either.
Maybe a past life. Who knows?
I'm 100% chalking it up to past life. I am definitely, I've been, and I feel very much that I've been and connected with that type of frequency in previous incarnations. I was always very drawn to, Bushido, the samurai code, martial arts, all of that, and edged weapons, which sounds a little bit, contrary to the pacifistic man that I am.
I mean, back to the archetypes, which I'm finding fascinating to learn about these days, and come from Carl Jung, I think, and expanded on by many others. But I think they're the basic four for the masculine archetypes, which is the warrior, the king, the lover, and the magician, right? And you seem to have a very good balance among all of those things. But I think a lot of men are some sort of try to repress their warrior side, and for me, I have the opposite problem. I attack problems with the warrior archetype most of the time. I'm learning to be more patient and compassionate, diplomatic, and all those things. But you seem to have those things largely in balance. How does one not gravitate toward one to the detriment of the others?
That is, the $1 million question. That is the jackpot that you're going for right there. I think, the challenge that we see primarily among humans in general is their difficulty in being able to balance different aspects of their lives, right? Is there a magic formula to this? I can't say that there is necessarily. I think it begins first with a kind of mindful consciousness and an aspiration and an intent to try and recognize and reconcile these different parts of yourself. And the deeper, of course, you go on your own personal journey of self-exploration and self-understanding, the better it is you become at understanding the various facets and parts of your nature and recognize which ones need perhaps to be enhanced or augmented and which ones need to be controlled, managed, perhaps modified or refined in some way, shape, or form. When it comes to, of course, the male question, which is an area which I've focused considerably over the past decade plus,
Yes.
it's easy to see how men gravitate, of course, to the warrior archetype because in so many ways, that's the one that's most celebrated in society, everywhere and by everyone. I was thinking about this recently and realizing that there is no more profound, significant, impactful, and attractive masculine archetype than the warrior archetype. I don't care what anybody says. I mean, all of our heroes are warriors for the most part.
Yeah.
The biggest of our heroes are warriors. Superman is a hero. He's a warrior. At the end of the day, he's a warrior. It may go biff, boom, bang, and all that sort of stuff, and maybe nobody looks like they're getting killed. But at the end of the day, he is battling. He's fighting and he's stepping into that power. So as an archetypal form, it's easy for men to gravitate toward that. Now, it's interesting what you said, insofar as some men move too far into that space and don't counterbalance it enough with an energy that is more conducive to peacefulness, right? And even when you talk about the warrior,
connect with their intellect, they disconnect with their heart, the lover aspect of their
compassion, the lover, the fool, even, an important part that we should be sensitive to. And I mean, it's understandable because there is so much that celebrates that warrior in our society and all around us all the time. But, for myself, I think that aspiring to be and to represent as much as I can a healthy balance of these different components that I think are very important for all of us to express. My mindfulness in that pursuit and my engagement with each at different times, and ultimately, this exercise of trying to synergize them and harmonize them has been one that has been probably different than most people, because much of my road that I've been on has been the less traveled road and has given me more of an opportunity to do this kind of work. So the challenge that probably most people are facing, and this is sort of ironic, but maybe telling, is that they just haven't had the time, created the time, found the time to do a lot of the work that would be necessary to maximize the probability of that type of synthesis.
Yeah. Well,
synthesis and self-understanding, right? Self-awareness.
That's important. I think, I don't know if that's important for everybody, but I know you and I were people who are, I don't know what the word is, striving or pursuing or interested in the pursuit of a higher understanding of the world. And
Yes.
in a lot of ways, for a lot of people that looks like coaching. And, you were my own coach not long ago. That was at a time when I was grappling with, relationship challenges, trying to escape the 9-to-5, and just to stop being so damn uptight all the time. Yeah. In fact, I found some of my notes that I wrote from our sessions.
That's great.
It said, I need to be mindfully committed to playing more and worrying less. And the other note was, have faith that as I reveal more of my playful nature, the world will respond.
Yes.
That was revelatory for me at the time. I was a very serious person.
Yes, you were.
But that was the exact perfect prescription for me at the time, and still today. When I get into the doing mode and the work mode, and when I have every half-hour block of my calendar scheduled, I know that I need to kind of just chuck it all in the sea for a minute and just enjoy and play and be less serious. And I think a lot of people, men especially, struggle with this. Do you have a in addition to the more being mindful and practicing, do you have any suggestions for how someone can maybe move more in that direction?
Well, in any sort of transformative process, I guess the first stage is always sort of coming to consciousness that there is a place to move towards, right? I begin from that state. So the man who first looks at his life, maybe hears us talking about this subject, thinks about it, reflects on it, and says, maybe this might be worthwhile as an exercise to do, or, make some efforts and attempts in this direction. Okay, that's step one. Step two, hopefully they'll come into contact with some supportive resources around that. Because if you're surrounded by and constantly bombarded by messaging that suggests that that is not correct, or that is contrary to what you should do, or how you should be, or how you should act, or if maximal, structured linear productivity is the only driving impetus for your essence, and you feel that somehow you're going to be undermining your masculine power by not being, an absolute laser focused, crush it, go forward kind of guy, right? It's going to be a big problem. So why do we meet the people when we do, and how that comes to pass, right? The classic old adage that when the student is ready, the teacher will arrive or present themselves, I think has a lot of validity and speaks to our intention, right? We call into our lives the things that we're hoping to find and the things that perhaps are best for us, and we're better at it the clearer we are about what that looks like, When I think about it, even now, it's fun to be doing this with you and just seeing this lighter, brighter you. Like, I mean, it really is a truth, This is not just, yeah, well, it's more than that though, but it's an inner sunshine, right? And it's a levity that you're carrying. And I mean, it's not about patting either of ourselves on the back, but I mean, I really do see it in you, Michael. And I mean, in all truth, it's a beautiful thing to see, especially since I know that you've stepped into this new role as a father as well. And
Well, and I would
inevitably,
say that's part of the reason why
of
I'm
course,
less serious. When you're down on the ground playing with your daughter, building blocks, or just imagining with her, it's hard to take yourself so seriously. And it's a wonderful thing to sing again and just babble with her and be silly.
and nor should you. I mean, that's the whole point, is that you should try and engage, in my humble opinion, you should try and remember and recall what it is to be in that space, and remember the freedom that you enjoy in that space, and remember the expansive world of awe that presents itself when you look at the world through the eyes of a child, and recall that inner child. I mean, it's those sort of psychobabble cliches, right? You must embrace your inner child, but all of these things have some some truth to them, aside from them being kind of cliche, right? And I think that's really important, especially for men, because this sort of movement from youth to manhood, when I was a boy, I played with things, and then when I became a man, I put aside childish thing and I became a man. This whole idea that there's this sort of massive transition that needs to be made, whereby now you arrive at this sort of place of masculine adulthood, and frivolities and lightness and levity and joy and happiness and playfulness and goofiness and silliness should all be put to the side, because real men don't do that, right? Whatever that story is, I'm not buying it, right? And as much as I can definitely be very serious and go deep and present myself in a variety of different ways, I think it's misleading, and perhaps it would be inappropriate for me not to be true to my nature. So what you see is what you get. I mean, the man you're seeing in front of you doing this is the same guy that you meet on the street whenever you meet him, Michael. It's the same thing, right? And I don't mind being sufficiently humble to make fun of myself, or to not inflate myself, to put myself on some sort of bullshit pedestal, or any of those kind of things. I think those are all part of the problem, and they're just part of boxes and roles that men subscribe to and find comforting, right? So
yeah, I think about this a lot, that people take themselves so seriously, and why. Ever since I was a child, I saw that money is just kind of a silly pursuit. But I'm rereading this book now, Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse.
Herman Hesse, yeah.
I'm at the part where he's, not to give too many spoilers, but he's just built a fortune, and he realizes that he started doing this as, he realized it was a game, a simple game, childish game. And he wasn't serious about it. He wasn't like his business partner, who was stressed out all the time and had attachment to the outcome of these business deals. He was just playing, and he did very well. That was his secret. And then over time, he got the servants and the houses and all these things, and the good food and the wine that made him sleepy and tired. And he realized one day that that still quiet voice inside of him, he couldn't hear it anymore. And at this point in the book, he decides that's it. I need to get back to myself, and he walks away from all of it. And I find that very tempting some days,
Of
to
course.
say, why am I doing all of this? What's the purpose of chasing and attaching to all this? It's not just the material things; it's the accomplishment. It's the feeling of significance. It's the ego games that we're playing, and there's a lot of it's quite interesting, but I also realize it's quite empty at the end of the day. What do you do with that? How do you pursue life in a way that lets you be in touch with yourself?
Well, there are a couple of points there. I guess I'll backtrack a bit and talk about the focus and preoccupation that we typically have on material wealth and the acquisition and development of our warehouses, our storehouses, and bank books and all that sort of stuff, and how we put so much stock in that. Of course, it's not really rocket science, and it tends to be something of a cliche for people to appreciate that money doesn't buy happiness. Yes,
Amen.
That is just a kind of obviousness that is anybody who pays any attention or has had any exposure to anybody who has money can recognize that it's not a guarantee of any state of greater grace or contentment. And anybody who pays any attention to the history of humanity and those people who have attained some state of personal inner grace can also attest to that, right? I mean, none of the greatest avatars that have ever walked on our planet as teachers of better being have ever celebrated wealth as being the primary reason for their success in achieving that goal. So we can recognize that that is the case, but there's just so much that goes into trying to co-opt us into believing otherwise and subscribing to a way of being that sees that as the focal point. And I mean, it's always important to make the distinction between the misquoting of the expression "money is the root of all evil" and the correct quoting of it, that the love of money is the root of all evil.
Yeah.
Money itself is not the problem. Money is just a hammer. Money is just a tool. Money is just a device. So the real consciousness building that I'm interested in and supporting, facilitating, encouraging is around ascertaining for yourself, how much do you need to have how much, or to have what? What are you actually trying to experience? I'm very keen on the experience as being the focal point, as opposed to the thing that is supposed to produce the experience, right? But most people get hung up on the thing and not the state. Our aspiration is to feel a certain way. So how do I feel a certain way? What do I need, and how well do I know myself to understand what I need in order to experience this optimized state of being that people would call, happiness, right?
That seems to be what everyone's after. It's not the thing, it's the state.
Absolutely.
It will be created by the thing. Whether it's the relationship, or it's the car, or it's the bank account. All of that is in service of trying to get us to a certain state. But a lot of that is very successful.
Yes, I want to feel good. It's not complicated. Everybody wants to feel good or wants to feel better. It's not complicated. That is the state they aspire to be in. They aspire to be in a state of greater contentment, however that manifests for that individual, idiosyncratic, completely. If your state of greater contentment is connected to this or that or the other, that's all on you. And I find that there are obviously some very similar key points that people experience that lend themselves to experiencing that greater state of contentment. But at the end of the day, that's what everybody wants. So
what are those experiences?
Sorry?
What are some of those experiences that will help you let go of this attachment?
Well, again, as I found it to be the case, the more that you have an opportunity to discover what it is that actually makes you feel good, honestly, what is it that is the root of your contentment? If everybody's going to ask themselves a question, they should ask themselves, what is my why? That is the question vis-a-vis what they're doing. Why am I doing this? And what is it that helps me to feel as contented as I would like to feel? What are the things that make me feel like I'm optimized in my being, in my essential being, right? A sense of purpose, a sense of direction, a sense of calling being fulfilled, a sense of talents being expressed, a sense of being appreciated in terms of what one is doing, right? A sense of stepping into one's greater raison d'etre, right? En français, your greater reason to be is huge. The quality of your relationships are a huge part of everybody's sense of contentment. In fact, I would say that the most important thing that anybody should be paying any attention to is the quality of the relationships they have with other people and the quality of the relationship they have with themselves. The individual conversation is about your own spiritual journeying. That's what I consider to be sort of the spiritual journey, is the inner dialogue that you're having with yourself, the deepening of that self-knowledge, the sense of yourself as a facet of something inexplicably larger than you, right? But in addition to that, I have not yet come across anybody who could tell me that they were happy as an island unto themselves, and that they were contented being disconnected and unattached and underattached to people, and that their greatest time of happiness was not when they felt closest to somebody or somebodies, right? So if we understand that that is a truth that most people are experiencing, then we understand where we should be investing our greatest energy and attention and focus and,
Yeah,
exercise.
it's a very good point you raise. It's one I've been thinking about, because my friendships in particular have suffered. My family relationships have suffered, and in part because of COVID and lockdowns, and we're not allowed to see people, or haven't been for a long time. But even before COVID, I was not doing a good job of building and maintaining friendships, which it's almost a cliche that it's hard for adults to build
Yeah.
friendships. I think maybe men even have a harder time.
Yes.
Um, why is that? If this is such an important facet of the human experience, why are we so shit at friendships?
Well, why are we not taught that the importance is greater, and why are we not, assisted earlier in life in understanding and appreciating this, and understanding what are the pillars of a successful, high quality relationship, right? I mean, one of the ones that you and I share and talk about regularly as it pertains to Universal Brotherhood and just us as humans in general is integrity, right? I mean, if you're not a person who is vested in aspiring to be strong in integrity in both your conduct with yourself and your conduct with others, it's very unlikely that you're going to build relationships that have real substance, depth, and of course, the most important, the T word, trust. They have to have trust.
Mhm.
There has to be trust. So, learning how to trust and learning how to be trusted are things that are really, really important. And unfortunately, pardon me, there are, and there have been too many, dare I say, I hate to use the term, but it's role models, quotation marks, people who are looked at
Yeah,
because of their celebrity status or because they're public personas,
idol.
who don't, people who are, they're role models. At the end of the day, they sort of boil down to being role models. They're people who are being emulated because somebody thinks that they have something special that they would like to copy.
Right.
And many of these individuals, unfortunately, are not truly vested in the quality of being that lends itself to best results. They are effective in certain areas and create a facade of success and happiness that unfortunately the less discerning look at and think this is how to be. Ergo, I am going to be this, uh, you know, grind to the end kind of guy who, takes no prisoners. And who's the guy? Green, the guy who wrote the 48 Laws of Power. I'm going to be Machiavellian. I'm going to like kick ass, take names, run things, because that's what bosses do, bitches. And that's how we roll, and I'm going to win. I'm going to win the game because I'm going to be so badass like that, right?
That
And I
is
mean, if you look at
aspiration.
people, yeah, but if you look at people who are basically regurgitating either that type of ideology or embodying it in some way, and you think because they're being put up there into the spotlight that they represent the ideal, it's very difficult to think otherwise. You think this is how you get to be that thing, whatever that is. And so
And
there's
this
a
is,
lot of misdirection.
yeah, it almost seems like a massive distraction, not a harmless one. This is what we're talking
Harmful
about. Is almost the
tremendously.
bread and butter of social media, right? I mean, Instagram is completely built on facade. And
Uh,
I heard
yeah.
somewhere recently a great quote that if someone calls himself an influencer, they have no actual influence.
Yeah, well, it's all, I wish that were true. Unfortunately, it probably isn't true, because there are a lot of people who recognize that they are actual, I mean, I won't name names because I don't really need to poke fun at any of them. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of people who have a lot of eyes on them for whatever reasons, male and female. And by virtue of having those eyes looking at them, they are bona fide influencers. They have influence. They have the capacity to
Right.
influence.
Yes.
And if they say, I have 1 million followers, or whatever number they drop, I've got this many followers, they can rightly declare themselves as influencers. Now, my problem is really, what type of influence are they exerting?
There's the rub.
And yeah, here's the rub. They are influencers, but are they positive influencers? And do they really represent what it is that they're trying to sell? Because at the end of the day, most of them are trying to sell something, right? They're trying to sell an image, they're trying to sell an idea, they're trying to sell some kind of concept of better being that other people will be envious of and desire to copy.
Yeah.
That's what they're trying to pitch. But, pull back the curtain on the Wizard of Oz and see the little gnome on the other side who goes home, is popping pills and can't get to sleep until he blacks out, or she, and feels like crap and feels, a tremendous sense of pressure because every day they have to wake up and play this character.
Yes.
And they don't trust anyone because everyone's a sycophant who's interested in something from them because suddenly now they're popular, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's not what people think it is. This is, I think, the most important thing, right? It's like you have to look beyond the glitter and try and ascertain what is the real gold.
That's so hard to do, Garth. I find, because
hugely difficult.
I've seen behind the curtain myself, but I'm still sometimes enticed by the shinery glitter, and unfortunately, our society is telling us at every turn, hustle, chase this, chase that, work harder, more hours. I've heard certain very popular media influencers say, if you're not working 80 hours a week, you're never gonna be.
You ain't shit, man.
And then
you ain't doing it.
And then the guy will turn around and preach the importance of family. I'm like, how much quality family time can you have if you're working 80 hours a week, right? And he looks terrible. He's got bags under his eyes. He's unhealthy, obviously. He's angry. It's obviously not something we should be trying to emulate. And yet, in the wealthiest countries, it seems to be the biggest problem. And I'm sure you have felt the relief of that pressure being in Asia. I felt it when my wife and I lived in Mexico for 6 months. I mean, I brought my own mental burdens with me, but there was such less pressure, and nobody was suffering because they weren't hustling.
Yeah. Well, the more pretentious the environment you find yourself in, the more difficult it is to resist those pressures, right?
Right.
So, I'm currently in a small northern mountain town where people go to the local, quote, convenience store or market in their pajamas and slippers. Like, nobody cares what you wear. Nobody knows or cares what Chanel or Gucci or Hermes or any of these brands are. They don't really give a shit. It doesn't really make a difference. A lot of them are rural people. They're farmers. They go and plow their farms. They, work their oxen. They're in the rice, planting their rice in dirty, muddy conditions. They go home.
Worried about how many Twitter followers they have.
No, they're not really tuned in. Although, the world is becoming a pretty unidimensional place in terms of people's concepts and understanding of this global phenomenon of social media. So I can't say that they're not connected to it, but the more pretentious the environment in which you find yourself, again, the more difficult it is to resist the pressure to be party to that. And I'll tell you what, if there's a red carpet event and you or I arrive in a shiny Lamborghini and Christ walks up in sandals and a robe, the camera's going to be focused on the Lamborghini.
Yeah.
The man who is Christ-like in his appearance, humble, modest, perhaps just wearing simple cotton attire and thongs on his feet is not likely to garner the kind of interest that the man who comes in a gold shiny Lambo, bling bling thing, right? And we are what we are as humans, and understanding the nature of the beast is a key piece to this conversation, right? I mean, baubles and trinkets catch the eye. We're not that different than fish. Oh, look, something shiny. Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Easily distracted and easily co-opted. And
Yes.
therein lies the rub, and therein lies the fact. This explains why so many people are unhappy, because they have, followed the lure, the dangle, and led them to places that were not really going to be good. The
Yes.
fish thinks that the bait is good. The fish is like, oh, that looks so good, right? And then it bites the hook and discovers, yeah, maybe not such a good idea after all. Yeah.
That pursuit might be fine for a while, and it might be part of everyone's path. But I do feel like more people over time are escape or are trying to find escape from that losing pursuit. And I know a lot of them have ended up in this evolutionary men's group you started, the Universal Brotherhood, which we affectionately call Tub. Um, it's wonderful that I found this group that I've sort of been searching for a long time, and it's unfortunate that we can't be physically present these.
Yet.
But it's an amazing outlet for I think everybody to speak about things that matter, that are outside of the realm of the hustle and the social media lifestyle. But is that what we need to sort of find these little pockets of sanity in the storm, or how do we
Absolutely. I mean, I
live our
think
lives?
that's very much the answer. Part of the challenge that humanity has faced, obviously, in the last 100 years or so, has been the concentration of people into large urban centers, the fragmentation of families, the development of the nuclear household that doesn't have a lot of strings and connections and roots to deeper extended family ties, and the lack of connection to community. The classic, again, another cliche is that you can live in a city like New York with 12 million people or whatnot and feel lonely. Well, it seems
Right.
paradoxical that you should feel lonely when there are thousands of people surrounding you. But if you're not connected to those people, if you don't have meaningful relationships that bond you to one another, you are going to feel the deficit in your life around that. And it seems, and again, I'm speaking for the majority of humans. There are some people who care less and need less, but the vast majority of people are seeking to be connected. They're seeking to have community of some sort. They're seeking to have camaraderie of some sort. And this, everything I say, as I've always told you, Michael, is these are my opinions and thoughts, and anybody can, discard as they will. But in my experience and my observation, the vast majority of people are seeking to have an opportunity to be known and to know.
Yes.
People want to be known. People want to put down the armor, remove the facade, and just be real. They want to be able to be authentic. They want to be able to express both their joy and their pain safely. And if we're talking about men, that dynamic is a very challenging one. On both of those fronts, ironically, I'm not talking just about being able to celebrate an accomplishment and, look at me, look at the new car I got, or the big job, or the promotion, or the money that I just made, or whatever the case may be, but to really be able to share joy and to be able to share sadness and to be able to do both of those in a place or with people who you can trust are
Yes.
going to honor that your experiences and your feelings are valid and reflect back to you what it is that you need to move through those emotions positively and in a healthy way.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in seeking that out, and I know you like the term "iron sharpens iron." Men.
It's not mine, it's biblical.
Sorry.
It's not mine, but yes, go ahead.
No,
I just want to make, we're wordsmiths, so I want to make sure. I didn't coin that term. I'm not claiming it's mine, folks.
really not. But I think this, actually, maybe let's do it this way. Why did you found the Universal Brotherhood? Was it an attempt to sort of create that group of exceptional men that are sharpening each other, or was it something else?
I mean, every time I get asked this question, I wrestle a bit with, should I have some sort of a pat made formulaic answer to provide to the media, here's my, elevator pitch sort of thing, or should I tell the truth? The truth is I didn't know what exactly I was doing when I started. The truth is I thought that I wanted to share quality men that I knew with one another who might not have a chance to meet each other. That's what I initially began. As the years have gone on, and this will be the 10th year actually that I've been holding the space, I began to realize there's a much bigger story here. There's a much bigger potential here. There's a much bigger possibility here around providing a context and an opportunity for men to be committed to a certain way of being. And that's really what moves me the most. And I mean, it may sound corny or trite or I don't know to whoever, but a la knights of old, a la, fraternal communities that are vested in a solid foundation of moral values that are shared, a solid philosophical base of exceptional being. Men who have declared themselves to want to be on an exceptional journey and to distinguish themselves from others by virtue of committing to that journeying. This has become more meaningful to me, and recognizing that there isn't a lot of dialogue like that necessarily. There aren't a lot of places and communities that necessarily hold space for that to happen organically, right? More and more I realized the value in that, and also began to recognize, of course, the challenges that men face in being able to build bonds with one another, to transcend some of their own unhealthy perspectives that they might hold of others, regardless of race, or based on race, or based on culture, or based on creed, or based on age even, right? Age and stage. There are a lot of these things that people don't realize are compromising their capacity to both bond and to learn from one another. And I think there's tremendous value in both of those experiences. The bonding and the learning and the sharing, I think, are really powerful.
Yes, I would agree. I'm so happy that I found that group of quality men, and it helped me realize, along with leaving the big city and becoming a dad, that a lot of my closest friendships were really based on a drinking buddy arrangement, and I think
Right.
a lot of friendships are. There's not many friendships that I see that are not based on, hey, let's go get a drink.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something that's not really maybe that important. Maybe I'm overgeneralizing, but there's something wonderful about putting men together in a room and saying, hey, let's talk about something important. And it's a fraternity, like you say. It's the anti-drinking buddy society. And you've done a very good job of I guess maybe selecting men, or maybe they self-select into this group, but I miss it. I feel like there's part of my life that's not being fulfilled because I don't have that.
Yeah.
It's not quite the same chatting on Facebook, but
no. And it's interesting. I really, for me, it's quite validating in terms of this as a labor of love, because just for your audience's sake to know, this has not been in any way, shape, or form an economically sensible or valuable enterprise. It has been a labor of love. It has cost me far more than it has earned me in terms of material gains. But for every person, every man like you who has come into contact with the Universal Brotherhood, who has had these type of experiences, who has felt inspired and empowered and engaged and uplifted by that type of contact, I feel a great sense of contentment, satisfaction, and gratitude that I've been able to hold that space, nurture that space, and provide that type of an opportunity. It's a meaningful thing. It's a very interesting and meaningful thing, and I think I'm looking ahead to see how this evolves next. What are the next iterations of this? Because one of the things that's become very clear to me is that as much as men will gravitate to these kind of platforms, of course, there are many different types of men within that. I've created an umbrella type of construct, but I'm most interested in the ones who are most sincere. So this is where I'm going personally. I'm most interested in the ones who are most sincere, because the idea is about building exceptional, authentic, masculine beings. And when I say masculine, I don't mean in a misogynistic way. I mean in a very open-minded, constructive, positive, non-toxic way.
Yes.
But celebrating the best aspects of who we are as members of our gender, which I consider to be a legitimate construct. Regardless of LGBTQ definitions, I'm still speaking to that construct as having validity.
Yes.
So for me, I've recognized over these many years that not everybody will have the same commitment to this path, because it is a kind of a path, Not everybody is really going to put money where mouth is and walk the talk, not just talk the talk. It's all well and good. Like, Michael, I've really celebrated you being one of the men. And I don't say this because you're interviewing me. I'm saying I wouldn't say it otherwise, but no, really. I really respect the men who are genuinely intent on being the kind of man that I've kind of described
Yes.
within the construct of this fraternal
Well,
group,
let's
right?
pick up that thread a little bit. So you qualified that when you said masculinity, you qualified this is not the toxic type of masculinity, which to you and I that's obvious, but to some people watching maybe it's not. And
Yeah.
there does seem to be masculinity has a really bad rap right now,
Yep.
and for very legitimate reasons.
Very legitimate reasons.
Yes, but
very, very legitimate reasons.
very legitimate reasons. Terrible things have come to light in the last several decades, and that's these things have been happening for centuries and millennia. Yeah. What I find unfortunate is almost like we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and that we're the pendulum has swung so far to the anti-masculine pole. That's it's not helpful to men, especially young men who are learning what it is now to be a good man.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you can share with us what's happening here, and what do we need as men?
You are just
big question.
No, but you're throwing nitro onto my fire of preference. By all means, flame on. Let's go. Everything you said is absolutely correct. The problem, as I see it, I guess, to get to the sort of central core, is that men in general have, unfortunately, earned a very bad reputation, more so than not. So even the idea of good men is almost a questionable construct, because there are so few that have risen and are shining as examples of what that looks like. And we are our own worst enemies for sure, which is why we kill each other all the time, do horrible things to each other. I'm talking men to men, for sure. And so it's a very, very challenging state of being, because the younger men coming up, as you said, who are aspiring within their hearts to be not like the bad guys that they've been seeing so often and rightly paraded in front of the media and whatnot, the Weinsteins, and the rest of these people, the Epsteins, and these, characters who deserve our disgust and disdain. They don't want to be those people, but they're not really very clear about what it means to be not that. What does that look like? Is it, and like you said in describing it with the metaphor of the pendulum, what we're starting to see a lot of course, is that what is celebrated as being good, and what has proven itself throughout human history as being good, are expressions of what we would call femininity. Nobody disparages the mother. Everybody celebrates the mother archetype, right? We love that, and we all are happy about that, and we're tremendously in love with that iconography and that image and that construct, right? And in the same way, very few women throughout history have been horribly malicious or devastating or murderous or dark or bad. So there's not that weight being carried on that side of the feminine masculine seesaw here. So if you're looking to sort of figure out what does good look like, I think a lot of men have been looking rightly in the direction of, well, this looks pretty good: nurturing, caring, compassionate, loving. I mean, all the qualities that we enjoy being recipients of are being demonstrated primarily by women. So where do we look to figure out how to be better? Maybe we look in that direction. But what I'm seeing, and this is the problem that you're noting as well, is that there's nothing wrong with that type of a skew. But my argument is that we're back to baby and bathwater, which is we have a tremendous disdain built in within us towards our own We have a self-hatred as men in many ways that may be subconscious, if not conscious. We don't really like ourselves because everywhere we look, there's shitty examples of what we are about. Every second day, there's another mass shooting psychopath who is a man, killing random people, doing random things, blowing himself up in the middle of a group of
So
babies. I
men,
mean, pick a day when that's not happening. There's no day when it's not happening. It's happening every single day. So with that constant bombardment of that type of unfortunately true presentation of what men are about, contrasted with the other side where we're seeing, women stepping in and stepping up, more and more women now coming into positions of prominence and using their prominence in more positive ways, articulating it better, more nurturing, more supportive.
which is amazing.
Which there is naturally, a shift that I see with young men to be looking in those directions and emulating many of those ways. Now, I am not saying that that's a bad thing, but I'm saying it's, to me, out of balance because I feel that the other side is not being well represented. The exceptional male is not being represented. Young men are not being presented with many exceptional examples of what an exceptional male looks like, who is both strong and compassionate, as
Yes.
per the 5 foundations in Tub, right? It was able to hold both of those. I consider myself very much an alpha guy, but I don't consider myself an alpha asshole.
Yes.
There's a
It's
big
a very
difference between being an
important
alpha
distinction.
asshole. Yes. There's a big difference between arrogance and confidence, right? I will not self-describe as being arrogant, and I would like to believe that most people who know me will not describe me as being arrogant either,
Agree.
but I am confident and I am strong and clear about who I am, and I embrace my strengths and I embrace my manly strengths, even as I am interested in being, compassionate. So even when we talk about like the warrior, Michael, right? The ideal warrior is someone who is seeking to use his martial powers and prowess to preserve peace, to be a champion for justice. I mean, this is the hero that we celebrate, right? We're not talking about some random person going around shooting random people. That is not a warrior. That is a pathetically wounded human who has a lot of hurt and pain and is projecting it onto society outside of them. We want the Jedi, a noble warrior. We want someone who steps up when people are in need and are not strong enough to do it for themselves. We want somebody whose job, yes, we want somebody whose job, his orientation, his personality is geared towards the maintenance of justice and the values that we hold so dear in the world, the protection of the weak, the protection of the disadvantaged, a champion for those people. That's what we really are moved by. If you think about the greatest of our heroes, they all fit into that mold. So that's what we're really looking to see and to have and to be like. But unfortunately, in real life, there are not enough of those characters for most people to be in contact with to be able to be duly influenced by them.
So how do we bring things back into balance? Is the only way for us to control the small part of the world we can control, which is ourselves, and set that example, or are there larger things that can be done, at an institutional level or a government level, or I don't know what can we do to bring balance back?
You hit on both of the two components there. One, of course, it's micro to macro or micro to micro, right? I mean, we sort of look at either of the two directions that things can move in, right? The grassroots movement of individuals who are duly committed to being exceptional, as we are committed, you and I are committed in that way, making concentric ripples of influence by virtue of sharing who we are and how we are, standing in our definitive desire to be that type of man and representing it to the best of our ability. We're not perfect. Nobody's declaring themselves to be so. I certainly am not. There's constantly room for refinement and growth and evolution and development. But for those of us who are mindfully committed to taking action and assimilating that action into our being such that it becomes part and parcel of who we are, inevitably it will. Just like they say, whatever you do, you become the thing that you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So the more mindfully you're doing this, the more you're actually becoming that thing, right? So that's the micro to macro.
Right.
Definitely, I think that's where it all begins, right? It begins at that really lower tier level of society and percolates up in some way, shape, or form, or outward, however you want to look at it. But then, of course, there's the other possibility, which is one that I play with in my mind regularly as being someone who has created, an entity that has some number and could have many more numbers associated with it. And this is where I start to wonder myself, what is the potentiality of any sort of movement that speaks to a certain way of being that is exceptional in the positive direction, right? What is the potentiality for that, provided that it's managed properly and that it's not misused or abused, right? And I want to make sure that everybody understands my disclaimer that, I am by no means interested in, come and join the cult of Garth or the cult of Chubb or any such things, right? I mean, that's a huge problem that is often, a scenario in which people are exploited who are vulnerable, but that's not at all my interest. I have no such interest and no such desire, and I think that's a really terrible thing as well. But providing people with support and conscious guidance about how to manifest that higher self, I think is the kind of work that you and I are very, very keen on. And using ourselves to the best that we can as examples of what that looks like and what that acts like is a big piece of that, right?
Yes, yes, and I
So
think
we'll see.
Your humility is legendary, but I do think that doing that for a lot of men, which is necessary, needed work. And, I think it's of course also the personal choices are important. The quote, "Be the change you wish to see in the world" is extremely applicable here, and I know we're both working on that. And of course, you say,
Wait,
perfect. You're certainly not. I'm not either.
Don't lose your train of thought. I'm going to change that quote. I like to do. We'll just play as we do, right? Be the man you hope to see in the world.
Yeah.
That's for us now, right? Yeah. I mean, be the man you hope to see in the world, right? Not just the change is old now. That's a dated phrase now. We're going to change now. Be the man that you hope to see in the world, right? If you are aspiring to be a certain type of man, or if there's a certain type of man that you would be impressed by, aspire to be that person. Right?
I think that's an excellent recipe for success. Yes, and I think we all know what is a man or a person that we would like to emulate, and it's probably not the ones that are idolized in our 2021 world.
They're the ones who will treat you well. They'll be respectful towards you. They will seek to see you rise to your potential genuinely and be happy for your success, not envious, not disparaging, not, passively aggressive, putting you down or undermining you in any way, shape, or form. They're ones who will love you and are able to do so and to say so in a masculine manner. I mean, take out the sexuality, a completely platonic, fraternal love you as a brother. They're going to be there for you, support you, see you shine, see you rise, see you happy. These are the kind of men that any man would want to have in their lives. Why would you not want to have a man beside you or around you or in your life who truly and genuinely wants to see you rise and shine at your brightest, at the brightest that you can be, with no envy whatsoever for whatever that looks like for you, but simply wanting you to manifest your potential to its highest degree. That is the kind of person that I would like to have around me. And I'm pretty damn sure that most people would like to have that kind of man around them. So be that kind of man for somebody.
It's a very good philosophy for life. And you mentioned earlier in the call that no man is an island. Absolutely. No man can reach his potential without being surrounded by other good, inspirational people, I would say.
Where's that quote from too? Because it's not mine either. John, who was it that said that? Who was it? No man is an island. Ask not for whom the bell tolls. The bell tolls for thee. It finished with that, the whole paragraph. Anyway, not our words, people. I didn't say that. I'm not the only one saying.
Yeah, that's right.
John Locke, is it? No, not Locke.
Yeah, D-O-N-E, I think is the last name, but
which one?
John Donne.
John Donne. John Donne. Yeah, Don Donne. That's what it was. Yeah.
I googled it.
Yeah, good. That was well done. That was quick. Nicely done.
Yeah, this is all very helpful, I think, for anyone, not just men. But I want to ask you one last question, Garth. We've talked about the sort of fraternal masculine relationships, but let's talk about women. I know that we have a deep admiration for and a respect for the feminine, and a fascination with romantic relationships as well. You talked earlier in the call about a disengagement that led you into the monastery. It's a very strange time to be in a relationship. Maybe you feel this as well with COVID, and we're couples are pushed into the pressure cooker and spending a lot more time, I think, together than
Yeah.
nature intended. For single people, this is a very even maybe stranger time with COVID dating. Can I kiss you? Is it allowed?
Yeah,
And we're in a Tinder world, which is totally rewriting the rules on dating and courtship. Let's talk about this. So what mistakes do you see men specifically making in relationships, and what could we be doing better, all of us?
Ooh, wow. Well,
I say men with
again.
women, but of course we accept that there are other gender pairings.
Yeah.
We'll focus on what we know.
Yes. Well, yes, I can only speak to the heterosexual experience because that's the only experience I know. And I'm, hey, to anybody who is not part of that particular bent, not a problem. Carry on, do your thing. I can only speak to what I know best. Yeah, it's a very interesting time in general. I think it's the biggest challenge, I think, or one of the biggest challenges that I see, and I do a lot of coaching with couples and people who are having relationship issues, because that's quite commonly one of the things that people are challenged by, is really around this whole idea of who is what, like role definition. And it's an interesting thing for you, Michael, as a traveler as well. I'm sure you've recognized this in your travels to countries where roles are more clearly defined. Now, many people would argue against those things, and I would too, if they're oppressive and repressive. But in terms of creating a kind of social harmony, there's definitely something to be said in societies where people are comfortable and contented with the roles that they find themselves in. Now, remember, I'm being very clear here, so people don't rip on me. I'm not saying, because most of them do see a kind of imbalance of power and a lack of equity between the sexes. Typically, that's the case. But what I found in my travels, where these roles are comfortably embraced by the participants to some degree, you have less friction because people are clear about who they are. So let's fast forward to the Western, modern, developing world where roles now are being very, very amorphous and not so clear, and anybody can do anything. And thankfully, we're moving in the direction of a greater and greater meritocracy. If you can lift me and carry me down the stairs and you're a firewoman, more power to you. Be it, do it, have the job, no problem. I have no qualms about anybody doing anything that they can do, and I'm all in celebration of that. So challenge A is in the confusion for men around what it is again to be a man in the 21st century. What am I supposed to do? Am I still expected to be the conventional breadwinner even though my wife is making more money than me? So how then do I feel like my contribution is being valued to the same degree? If that was the thing that I hung my self-esteem on most confidently for so long, and society did as well. This type of dialogue, which is part of the conversations that we're having, is a huge part of the challenge. Addressing and redressing a lot of the very, very entrenched and much of its subconscious sexism that we are a part of. Let's be really clear here. Men have run the world forever.
Yes.
Like, I don't care, the Cleopatras and the here and there few Catherine the Greats and the few, highlight reels of women who have been in positions of power. As a general rule, day in, day out, whether they're in positions of political authority or not, men have been running the world for a long time. In the last 50 years, that equation has been shifting dramatically. The balance of power has been shifting dramatically. The status quo has been changing dramatically. So this is creating a lot of moving sand under the feet of men in terms of who and how to be, even as women are stepping more and more onto solid platforms of ascendancy.
Yeah.
So this,
they're doing very well right now
they're doing wonderfully well. I mean, I'm a tremendous celebrant of it because I celebrate any human experiencing, the possibility of discovering their potential. I think that's really what the key is. But, I think a lot of men are going to be struggling right now and for the next little while until we start to figure out how to make peace and be comfortable with the idea that women are gaining speed and momentum, moving faster and faster. More and more glass ceilings are being shattered. More and more opportunities are being presented. I mean, I think about the sport that I have enjoyed a lot over the years because of my background, namely MMA. And I think about all of the phenomenal female athletes who are now participating in that sport. Whether you like pugilistic sports or not, whether you think that it makes good sense for people to kick the shit out of each other or not, let's take out that judgment for the time being. But it's very interesting to see the rise of women who have chosen, not by force, but by choice, to become this type of athlete and to participate in this type of an arena. But wow, I remember before they, I remember back in the day a few years ago when Dana White said, "Oh, no, 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 we're never going to let women into the UFC." I remember him saying it. It's not going to happen. And it has happened in a big way. Not only has it happened, but it's been hugely embraced, and they have proven themselves to be very, very successful, talented, and effective athletes.
Yes.
So, we have all these things that are shifting and changing in the world. We have all these changing sort of perspectives. And if you are coming from a socialization process that basically said, you can rest on your laurels as a man because that's the way the world works, you're in for some big surprises coming up, son, especially this next generation, millennials and stuff. Women are kicking ass and taking names.
That mentality is very much alive and kicking. And I was going to say that, women are making all these exciting strides, and it doesn't seem like men are really on the path yet. As
not even close.
I'm generalizing, but a lot of good men making great progress, but a lot of men are sort of still
struggling.
You've done some terrible things over the last 6 millennia, and it comes back to this buzzword, the patriarchy, which very much alive and kicking. But I would suggest that the vast majority of men are not part of the patriarchy, don't have the type of power over anyone that we lament.
It's kind of, and I dare I say, and not because of my own melanin content, but it's kind of like the white privilege idea, right? Male privilege is a reality that every man enjoys. Right. You don't have to be participatory consciously to be the beneficiary of. You are being paid more, just as a general rule across the world. You are given a differential level of respect typically. I mean, we all enjoy that. So
true.
I would agree with you that conscious participation in patriarchal structures has declined markedly in the last several years, for sure. And the vast majority of people who are in their 20s and 30s, men in particular, are not necessarily aligned with that type of thinking. Now, I say that in the developed world, whatever that means. But in many parts, pardon me, of the more traditional developing world, that's still a huge gap, right? But you don't have to be a participant to be a beneficiary. Like, you don't have to be an active participant to be a beneficiary. So I guess, again, learning that you've been a beneficiary and that you are a beneficiary and that this is changing and that you may need to adapt the way you are in ways that you perhaps never thought about. It's going to be a big challenge for many, and it's an important one. And I think it's going to be a big part of the growth curve ahead. But there are some really, we could go off, there's some really interesting shifts that I think are going to be hugely impactful on this conversation in particular. The gender conversation in particular has some really big things ahead of it, and I'll tell you where they're coming from. 3 areas that I see, or 2 areas in particular that I see really are going to be poignant: VR and AI. VR, AI, yeah, why so? How does this relate to this conversation? Well, the more we're able to create simulated worlds in which people can have what they want, when they want it, and how they want it, without having to really invest much in their own personal growth or development, the more problematic things are going to become for real relationships between real people.
People will escape into their fantasy worlds.
The movies are being made. We've seen more than a few of them out there. Her with Joaquin Phoenix not that long ago came out. Men having bona fide relationships with AI females, for example, right? And vice versa. I think we're moving to a really interesting phase in human relations. And I'll throw another one on you, right? I mean, if we've got AI and we've got VR, and we start to move towards greater cybernetic technologies and whatnot, whereby we're able to start producing, artificial robotic humanoid type structures. I mean, I note your smile, and it's the right smile. No, but it's the right smile for 2021. But let me tell you, 2050, come 2050, you and I might be having a very different conversation about this. This might become quite de rigueur and quite commonplace. What happens? What is going to happen ahead? Here's the posit for your people to think about, right? What is going to happen ahead in the future, in a few years, when you're able to have an AI that knows you better than almost anybody because they've downloaded in an instant every little facet of who you are, drawn associations between it. They know the sound of the music that you like, so they can always pick the best music for you. They know the kind of movies that move you because they've monitored everything about you, know all about how your pupils dilate and respond to different responses. They have done an analysis that is, amazingly accurate in determining who and how you are, and they adapt in order to interact with you in the most harmonious way possible, as opposed to this very random process of humans coming together. Yes. It's going to change things a lot. And then, if I may add on to that, the potentiality for male sexuality to be expressed in connection with these, quote, devices or technologies, it becomes a very, very, very curious time ahead, I think. And I think this is something that I'm really wondering what's going to happen. Because even as we're at a point now where there is this demand and this need for increased gender understanding and a change in perspective and an awakening of men to a different level of consciousness and an embracing of the best parts of masculinity in order to be the best men they can be with women. I don't know what's going to happen faster. In many ways, Michael, I feel that this technology is going to supersede human initiative. It's moving at such a pace, by which I mean, we may not be able to nurture and develop enough tub men, enough of our exemplary knights in the next little while before it becomes kind of like math. By which I mean, nobody cares to do math anymore because everybody has a calculator. Okay. Why do I need to stress my brain? Why do I need to work so hard to make my relationship work when I can have a relationship?
Why bother investing time with your human partner if they're just going to be a pain in the ass when you can go to the cyborg and have exactly what you want, every fantasy.
Exactly what you want, when you want it, how you want it, no beef, no muss, no fuss, no bother.
We're in a bit of a race here.
I don't know that we can possibly win. I don't think we can win this race. I think, honestly, and that may sound somewhat cynical, but I really don't think. I think the speed with which technology is developing and the impetus and the pressure and the desire and the need and the loneliness and the sense of disenfranchisement that men are experiencing, and the ennui and all of the psychic and psychological problems that humanity has been plagued with up until now are still present and busily causing all kind of grief and struggle and strife. I think that what will happen is that we will end up having hopefully a nucleus, this is what I expect, a nucleus of the few, 1%. You and I will be the 1%ers who will be dedicated to this path because, well, maybe because of our age and stage to some degree. I mean, you're not as old as I am. I'm the old man in the room. But you know what I mean? Like, the jump off for us is not going to be as easy, but for a 20-something-year-old now who maybe doesn't do the work, if he doesn't do the work by the time this stuff arrives when he's a 30-something, I don't know. But I do see, in terms of the addictive appeal of gaming, that this is exactly the direction that we're seeing people moving in. People are less inclined towards real athletics. Like, I mean, I have all these, these guys who think that they're badass because they can kick your ass on Mortal Kombat or whatever the game is that currently out there. And I always used to laugh at that. It's like, well, that's not real. You got to come and train and then we'll talk about what's real. But it's like, but why do I need to? I'm going to go, I'm on a big screen. I kick ass and take names and people think I'm amazing and I get all kind of props for it. I don't really need to do anything. And I think the same thing is going to happen in these other areas. And I'm really not sure what that portends for us in terms of gender relations.
I suppose every generation has had their challenges. I mean, I read a story, I don't know if it's true, but about a time when, books were just becoming a thing, thousands of years ago. And the elders of the society were saying, well, books are going to just corrupt our children. And it's the end of, the oral tradition. There's always, of course, some greater risk that was unforeseen. And I hope it's correct to be an optimist on this front, that humanity will adapt to whatever challenges comes. But then again, who knows?
We'll adapt, and and it's not to say that it's going to be worse. It's just going to be different. Like, we will adapt, Michael. I agree with you completely. There will be an adaptation. It's just that it's likely to be different, and it may not be the adaptation that you and I would consider to be ideal. Like, let's say here, let me just for fun. And I know that we're running short on time and stuff, but let's say that this sort of world that we're presaging does come to pass, and let's say, I don't know, 7 out of 10 men choose to plug in, tune in, turn on, drop out, they go into their VR world, right? They do the Matrix thing and they plug it in like that. And as a result of that, because they're physically under engaged with the world, all of the predatory behaviors, all of the antisocial behaviors, all of the stuff that men have been doing and are doing every day in terms of abuse of women and children and girls and all the rest of that, declines tremendously, because there's an outlet that's virtual as opposed to real, and these men are just off. They're off grid, off human grid, right? And so what we have is all right. So we end up with all these people who are these emaciated plugins, and they're more or less content with their VR girlfriends, and they're more or less outside of human interactive paradigms, and all of the rates of masculine perpetrated crime diminish. Okay, so there's an outcome, right? That it doesn't seem ideal. Huh?
Pros and cons.
Yeah, and I mean, okay, so then the world looks around and goes, wow. Now that we've got 70% of the men plugged into playing games all the time, and they're happy enough doing that, they're not doing the shit that they'd be doing out in the world instead. So okay. It's trade-off.
No matter what happens, it's going to be a very interesting and terrifying and somewhat wonderful future. I say bring on the singularity, bring on the AI.
Bring on the singularity.
What happens? Like you said, we can only control our little part of the world, which is ourselves. So I suppose, it's a fascinating thought experiment, but really ultimately we can only choose who we want to be as men or as women, and take it.
And that's the work that you and I are interested in doing. That's until that happens, that next phase and stage. Today is the day. Tomorrow, you and I both know that there will be hundreds of thousands and millions of disaffected, discontented, unhappy men out there trying to figure out their shit, trying to sort through their lives, trying to make the day work, trying not to blow their brains out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's what's going to happen today and tomorrow, man. And so until things shift, we've got a lot of work still to be done. And it's going to come down to each man who is fortunate enough to have the right access to the right resources and the right willpower to act on them, to take steps forward to try and create an exceptional, the best possible life for himself. And that's all we can try and do, is facilitate that.
I know you're trying to do that work, and I know you'll continue to do that work. Why don't we leave it on that positive note? I want to respect your time. And, just thanks so much, Garth, for being our guide today. I always have a wonderful conversation with you and appreciate our talks. I think we probably have a follow-up episode coming at some point, because I
gotta plug my book at some point. I didn't do that yet, but we'll save it for another time.
Let's talk about the chi of beauty. I have cracked your book several times recently, and I'm not a huge poetry guy, but I do find wisdom in the verses. And
right,
I know that these are coming from a place of wisdom and a place from your heart. So tell us about the book, and where can we get it?
Well, as a matter of fact, Michael, I just happen to have a copy right here.
Excellent. Beautiful. The chi of beauty.
Yes, I like to call it the key of G because it just
Oh, the
rhymes better
key.
than the
Oh,
G. Yeah, you see the rhyme, the key of G, right? Which is
I
you
get
can
it.
pronounce it that way as well. Right. I'm not one to really self-promote very much, so I would just say that I would like to believe that the things that are intimately shared in this book will resonate with some people, particularly people who are appreciative of wordsmithery and language and the use thereof, and for those who are looking to possibly glean some bits of value from the things that I have downloaded. Yeah.
We'll put a link to that in the YouTube video, and I also wanted to ask, where can people find you if they want to connect with you? Is it
They
Manpower?
can't find me.
They can't find you.
I will find you. This is how I work.
uh,
No, the easiest way to find me, I guess, would be via my website, which is manpowercoaching.com. Very easy.
manpowercoaching.com.
Manpowercoaching.com. Yes,
Love
and
the
you'll have a
name, by the way.
chance to.
So, Garth, thanks so much. You've been a wonderful friend and mentor to me, and I think you were our mentor and guide today. So it's much appreciated by everyone that's watching, I'm sure. Thanks so much, and let's do this again soon.
Love you, man.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye.